Okay, good afternoon. Welcome. It's Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. I'm going to call our meeting to order at 4 p.m. And we're going to start with a moment of silent reflection. So please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Moving on to our land acknowledgement, the municipality of Port Hope exists on the lands of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe traditional territory covered by the Williams Treaties. We honor and recognize First Peoples as rights holders and stewards of the land and waters on which we have the privilege to live, work, and play, including the Ganaraska Forest and River. We pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. We commit to actions towards truth and reconciliation by recognizing the United Nations Declaration on the rights of Indigenous peoples, strengthening ties with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, especially those who make their home in Port Hope, and learning from Indigenous ways of knowing and being. We do so by recognizing the past and working towards a shared future. Moving on to item number 2. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? I note that none were received in advance of today's meeting. Seeing none. Moving on to item number 3, items for consideration. 3.1, midterm training regarding roles and responsibilities of council and other related matters. As listed on today's agenda, today's special meeting is to receive midterm training regarding roles and responsibilities of council and other related matters. This training will be conducted by our Municipal Integrity Commissioner, John Mascarin, Aird & Burles, LLP. I want to note this is a public meeting and is an opportunity for members of the public to also understand council's role versus staff's role and the intricate relationship between the two. It's an opportunity for us as council to ask our integrity commissioner questions about how provincial legislation impacts our role as the head of government and how we can work together with staff and with the community to achieve the best and healthiest outcomes for our municipality. I also want to highlight that if necessary, council has the authority to move to closed session should we wish to discuss confidential matters as prescribed by the Municipal Act. And if that were to happen, I would need a mover and seconder to move to closed and we would stop the live stream. So I would now like to welcome Mr. Mascarin to the podium, and we very much look forward to your presentation. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's a very nice introduction. Good afternoon, Council. I'm John Mascarin. I'm very pleased to be here, and I thank staff and Council for allowing me the opportunity to come today. Do, in a sense, a midterm refresher. If you think that you're the only ones I'm doing this for, that's not true. I have done, I kid you not, maybe about 30 different municipalities on, well, what I keep calling a midterm refresher. And we're almost exactly 2 years. I don't know what the term of office was for you, but it was, you could have started on November the 15th of 2022. So you're almost exactly 2 years to the beginning of from the beginning of your term. And I thought that this would be a good opportunity, and staff agreed. So I will run through roles and responsibilities. And Madam Mayor, what you said was absolutely correct. I will expand upon that a little bit. It's not just council dealing with staff, it's also council dealing with each other and what the roles are of council, of the head of council, and individual counselors, and how they're all supposed to work together with staff. And so I'll do all that, and hopefully you will have questions of me, and I'd be pleased to answer them here on the spot, live. Keep me, flying by the seat of my pants. I'm happy to do that. And as you indicated, Madam Mayor, if there's something that you would prefer to have in a confidential setting, you're perfectly entitled to pass a resolution, go in camera, for training and education purposes under 239 3.1 of the Municipal Act. So roles and responsibilities.
John, just yes. Before you begin, I'm going to just check in with my council members, and in the interest of just having the presentation all done, could you hold your questions until the very end of the presentation as opposed to asking them along the way? Would everybody feel comfortable with that approach? Okay. So there we go.
Great, and that'll keep me flowing. And I've asked Charisma if she could please give me the indication if I'm going too long. So hopefully I'll try to stay on track and give you plenty of time to ask questions. So as an introduction, let's just start. And I think I'd probably mention this in my original orientation and training for you. When you serve on a council, your ultimate obligation, bottom line, is to act in the best interest of the corporation and the citizens that you represent. And if you're, again, asking, well, why is it the corporation and the citizens? It's because the definition of a municipality in Section 1 of the Municipal Act says a geographic area whose inhabitants are incorporated. So you owe fiduciary duties to the corporation, and that's very important, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. So I'm going to run through these things: roles and responsibilities, as I said, of council, the head of council, individual members, the municipal administration, and then how do council and staff work together. And then, as a number of examples, I want to talk about certain areas of influence where you as members of council may have influence, even though you might say, oh, hold on, I'm not sure what you're getting at, because you've just told us, when I get to the individual council members, we have no executive powers or ministerial powers. That's true. But you will always be thought of as a member of council in your community. Just think if something bad happens, right? Are you going to be identified as, Mr. Pearson? No, it'll be Councillor Pearson. And so it's like a 24/7 job. So I'll get to that. So at the end, areas of influence, some tricky areas that in this term, and believe me, many terms before, I've come across where there's been some misalignment between staff, between council and council members, the head of council, and so on. So roles and responsibilities of council. This I'm going to went too fast. The most important decision-making body in the municipal level, right? You make legislative and executive decisions. Sometimes, very rarely, you also make decisions as a quasi-judicial body. Occasionally, that's like 2% of the time. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it. But what's really interesting there is you're allowed to have an inherent bias when you're a member of council. And some people don't understand this. And I get complaints all the time from people, which I managed to, do away with relatively quickly. It's like, well, the council member made these statements. The council member can't do that before they make a decision. And in fact, that's not the law. When you're acting in your legislative and executive capacity, which is like 98% of the time, you're making decisions on big policy issues at the municipality, or you're passing bylaws or resolutions on legislative matters under the Planning Act, Ontario Heritage Act, under the Municipal Act. In those cases, you're allowed to have an inherent bias, as long as you don't have a closed mind. So just keep that in mind. You're allowed to take a position because one of your roles is a representative role, and you're allowed to stand up at council and hear a delegation and to turn around to your fellow council members and say, I like what that person has said. I think she's absolutely correct, and I think council should stand behind her, and I support this. Some people in the audience might go, how can they do that before they make a decision? Because that's against the principles of administrative law, except for the Supreme Court of Canada has been absolutely clear that a council member is an administrative decision maker, but it's a unique kind of decision maker, and that's because of the political context. So, governing body, here's your role as council. I showed you this, I think, at orientation. It's in the Municipal Act. That's what it says, okay? But Guelph, the University Village Guelph and the City of Guelph case says, in Ontario, the decision-making powers of municipalities is given to municipal council, and it is to exercise those powers by bylaw. Now, that's not absolutely correct, and I'll show you in just a moment. But look at the second paragraph. The council is the general agent of the corporation, the municipal corporation, for all purposes, and it is the means whereby the municipality may bind itself to a course of actions. And during orientation, I probably said to you, this is an override of what is normally thought of as being the indoor management rule, which is a rule that applies to business corporations. Municipality is a corporation, but it's a municipal corporation, a very different body. And you'll see I have a couple of slides coming up that speaks to it. But the very last sentence, it is the council is the general agent of the corporation for all purposes, the means whereby the municipality may bind itself to a course of action. So only council can bind the municipality. That's what it says. And that's contrary to the indoor management rule in business corporations, which say if you're a business corporation and you're a director or senior officer, you may be able to bind the corporation. You can't actually do that in the municipal setting. And that is key to thinking about, well, what can you do as a municipal council, right? So here's the section 5. So going back. In Ontario, the decision-making power of municipalities is given to municipal council, right? Well, that's section 5.1. The powers of municipalities shall be exercised by its council. The second part said have to be exercised by bylaw. That's not actually correct, because if you look at 5.3 on the screen, it says, unless the municipality specifically authorized to do otherwise. And you'll see a number of instances in the Municipal Act where council can just give an approval, pass a resolution. Or the one that causes a great deal of contention is, what happens when you're in an in-camera setting? It says you're not allowed to take votes, except, then the municipal act says, except that there's a caveat, and you can have votes in 2 conditions. One is if you're in camera properly for one of the subject matters that's authorized, and there's 14 of them in section 239, and you're either you're making a procedural decision, or you're giving advice or directions to officers, employees, or agents of the municipality, right? You are specifically authorized to do otherwise. You can make a substantive decision, and your clerk, Brian Gilmer, and I had this discussion at one point. Really, you can have yes, you can, because just think about it. Your solicitor comes to council and is giving you advice on a litigation matter that you're involved with. And the solicitor says, I recommend to you that you settle this. Okay, are you supposed to go out back in open session and all of a sudden tell the world, including the other side, that you're willing to settle? No, what you do is you give direction to your solicitor. Go ahead, settle it for X amount of dollars. You've made a substantive decision that you can settle it for that amount, but you've given direction to staff to carry it out. Actually, we argued this point in court last year. It was about a year and 3 months ago in Patry versus Elliott Lake, where the argument was council can only proceed by bylaw. And it was really interesting. The other side had proffered a case from 1967. And I said, Your Honor, I don't have to proffer a case from 1967. I can look at the Municipal Act today. It says, unless the municipality is specifically authorized to do otherwise, and you can follow it through. The court agreed. So here's from the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry. By the way, must reading. Councillor Tom's not going to pick on you, but you're a new council member. This is almost must reading for a new member. You see how badly things could go. Justice Morocco, in this case, as the Judicial Inquiry Commissioner, said the council as a whole is the directing mind of the municipality, not the individual members. Again, that's what the Municipal Act says. That's what the case law says. And that's clearly an override to the indoor management world, which the Supreme Court of Canada and a number of other important decisions have said this does not apply to municipalities. That means that you as individual members of council can't go out and try to bind the municipality by statements that you make, by things that you write, even if it says, Councillor Andrews, with your letterhead, you can't bind the municipality. The municipality has to pass a bylaw or give some specific direction. Look at the last line there. Council members must not seek to wield that power unilaterally or away from the council chambers. That's where you get into trouble. So I'm just going to now turn, Madam Mayor, to the head of council. There it is. The role of the head of council is, let's just skip number 1, but look at number 2. Preside over council meetings so that its business can be carried out efficiently and effectively. I can't believe how many times people just don't recognize that the mayor, as chair, has really strident responsibilities, and sometimes you really have to make the tough calls. You may not gain a lot of friends sometimes, Madam Mayor, by making those calls, but you have to. It's in the Municipal Act. One of your main roles is to make sure that council meetings are carried out efficiently. That means, with due speed, not that things get mired in procedural shenanigans and gerrymandering and what's the one where Jimmy Stewart talks at in the Senate and he just talked, what's it called? Filibusters, right? That's verboten. You can't do that. And effectively, it has to be effective. So anyway, I want to point that out because that isn't happening in so many places, and I've had to do the, Madam Mayor, Mr. Mayor, Madam Chair, you've got to step it up. You've got to call people on it. I had the chair of a large regional municipality send me something, and she said, "Did I overstep my role here?" It was a little bit of tension going on between council and a couple of members of council, staff and a couple of members of council on a very controversial large land assembly. And she just put her foot down. She said, "No, I'm not going to allow that question. You've asked it 3 times. It's been answered, right? And you're cross-examining." And she was right to do that. And I said, "No, you're absolutely right." Interesting enough, didn't a complaint come in on just that she was overstepping her role? And I actually completely disagreed. She was doing what she should be doing, is stepping in and trying to monitor the situation and bringing some semblance of correctness to what was happening there. So the head of council is the CEO. By the way, that's the first sub bullet. Act as the chief executive officer. And so many heads of council just don't understand what that means. They think it means, oh, a chief executive officer. I know what that means in the business context, right? Not in the municipal context, because in the municipal context, here's what it is. I don't even know why this was really added to section 226.1 of the Municipal Act. This was the Bill 130 amendment. It's I don't know, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And Justice Morocco agrees with me in the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry. He says the head of council is the CEO is a misnomer. The roles and responsibilities of a head of council differ from those of a corporate chief executive officer in a meaningful way. The head of council does not have the same powers, can't step in and have unilateral power to commit the municipality to any particular course of action. Right now, of course, why? Because in Ontario, mostly we have a weak mayor system, right? This traditional system of government here in Ontario, where the head of council is the ostensible leader, right? But it's really a leader among equals is the mayor. Only a single vote at council, although the head of council is the main representative, main spokesperson for the municipality. But Port Hope is not a strong mayor municipality. And in, I don't know, a couple of authors there who are really erudite in August, wrote in the Ontario Municipal Act in commentary, no member of council, including the mayor, has, quote, inherent executive powers, and a member can only act in concert with a quorum of council to implement decisions and actions on behalf of the municipality. So even if this municipality had been a strong mayor municipality, it's probably not what the public thinks it is. It's not pure executive unilateral power. There are some extensive powers. I have them on the screen. I am not going to talk about them to a great deal. 46, I think, municipalities have been granted or have been designated as strong mayor municipalities. And I think I've said this before to you. I've said it many places. Even where I'm legal counsel, general counsel to 4 strong mayor municipalities, I think it's terrible legislation, just abysmal, disparaging legislation. I don't like it. It's eroding democracy. Look at the Better Municipal Governance Act. What a terrible name for something. It's the opposite of that, in my view. The mayor plus only 1/3 of council has the authority to enact certain bylaws if the mayor has a reasonable opinion that the bylaw may potentially advance provincial priorities. So it's not quite as broad as you think it is, but I still think it's just terrible legislation. And you see what's happening across the province. Strong mayor powers come in, and the next thing you know is the CAO has been turfed, and many of the senior staff have been let go for no other reason that they're not going to be puppets of the mayor in those municipalities. I just it goes against 200 years of local governance here in Ontario, and I think it's terrible legislation. So, turning now to the members of council, there is no express role that's articulated in the Municipal Act. It's interesting because almost all the other players, all the other stakeholders, key people, have particular statutory designations, functions, words but not for an individual member of council. So I quoted this, and I'm sure I've told you this before. The Ministry of Municipal Affairs in the Ontario Municipal Councillors Guide, the role of a councillor, 3 main roles: representative, and I've spoken just briefly about that. That's when you can actually stand up at council and before you make a decision, say, I think this is the way we should vote. You're there to attempt to convince your fellow members on how to do things. That's your power. Your power is to sit in an elected assembly and try to convince a majority of the council to vote with you. That's your power. You're also a policymaker, right? Because you pass policies, you adopt policies, and you're a steward. The word is trustee that I would like to use, and these roles often overlap. Now, at the close of my presentation today, I'll come back to this slide, this one quote, but I'll show you the full paragraph. I've only shown you part of it, and I think the full paragraph merits consideration, but I want you to see it in context after I'm finished my presentation. George Rusty wrote in the Handbook for Municipal Councillors, members of council have no authority as individuals to act on behalf of the municipal corporations, except if you act together with the other members at a meeting with quorum, and you pass a bylaw, or you enact a resolution, or you give direction in camera, or you give some sort of approval as is authorized under the Municipal Act or some other statute. You are fiduciaries, and I put this up because some people tend to forget this. An elected official stands in a fiduciary relationship. What is a fiduciary relationship? You have a duty of care, so you have to make sure that what you're saying is correct, it's honest. You have a duty of loyalty. You can't try to derogate from your obligations to the corporation. And I see this happening more and more often on this absolutely beautiful but very scary US election day. You see where duty of loyalty has come into question in the US recently. You know, who is a patriot? Who is honoring the Constitution? Those things are really confused now in a lot of places. You have a duty to act in good faith. And if you do, if you as an individual member of council act in good faith in doing something, or carrying out something, or even in not doing something, you will be immune from someone bringing an action to try to make you personally liable. If you act in bad faith, that immunity, which is statutory under Section 448, will flutter away and dissipate, and you'll be left on your own. And we're dealing with a couple of those issues in our office. We have a couple of lawsuits that have just been filed, and it centers very much on who is acting in good faith. And lastly, confidentiality. You have a stringent duty of confidentiality, and I'll round back up to that. You're not employees. I just want to mention this. Many times council members get very confused. You're told you're not employees, and then you go, oh, well, then the Occupational Health and Safety Act doesn't apply to me. Not true. You can't perpetuate workplace harassment, workplace violence against people in a workplace, right? You can't be the beneficiary, so you take the burden of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, but because you're not an employee, you can't say, oh, the municipality needs to protect me. You're actually not protected, which is a really interesting concept, right? And you see this, there's lots of talk about harassing public officials. What about the public who's harassing the the public officials. I mean, it's a real issue. I understand that. So you're not employees. This went back to like 20 years ago, the St. Elizabeth case, which I thought was absolutely clear. But you have Raz versus City of Mississauga and Ron Starr just from last year, where this came to light again. And Karen Raz was you may recall, was the council member of Mississauga whose car was keyed by Ron Starr, the former member of Council Mississauga. It was on video. Hey, I've seen the videos. We represented the integrity commissioner. But she argued, well, the municipality didn't protect me. I'm an employee. And the court said, you're not an employee. Absolutely not. Maybe there were other obligations, but not as an employee. So let's now switch. Let's go to the municipal administration. So just talked about council, head of council, and individual members of council. So let's talk about municipal staff. Here it is. It's in section 227. The role of the officers and employees of the municipality there's three things. One, they implement council's decisions and they carry out council's decisions. Two, they undertake research and provide advice to council. That's the role. And three, they carry out such duties as have been assigned by the Act or by the municipality. And who's the municipality's decision maker? It's council. So what's staff there to do? Staff is there to do what you would like them to do, what council would like them to do. And many times we get, on the way here, I had a call from a municipality. Our mayor is directing us to do certain things again. And I go, wow, I've talked to the mayor already about it. What's he directing you to do? Council made decisions, wants us to do something different. Well, you don't need to follow that, right? So council is the decision-making body. Council is there to be served by the staff. Staff are there to implement your decisions, to carry out your decisions, and to do research and give you wise, professional, cogent advice. That's what staff is there for. Again, Justice Morocco, municipal staff are imperative to the functioning of the town. It is staff's role to provide council with, look at the word, objective information and recommendations, to inform council's decision-making and to carry out council's decisions. So many times I see this, council's not happy with staff because staff aren't doing what they want, what council wants. But sometimes what you've asked staff to do is come back, give us a report. Hey, you're professionals. There may be engineers, there may be planners, maybe lawyers, maybe accountants on staff. All of those people are professionals. They have professional obligations. They have codes of ethics, regulatory requirements they have to abide by. Staff is there to give you neutral, objective advice so you can make the decisions. Staff is not there to just do what you necessarily just want them to do. They can't change their opinion. I was asked this a little while ago by a head of council who said, in the past, we've changed staff reports. I go, you did what? I go, you can't change staff's reports. Staff reports will have recommendations. And depending on the municipality, sometimes the staff report will be, here's the options. I'll be honest, I don't think that's great. I don't like options. I like recommendations. This is what you should be doing. Staff are not to be chewed out because they're giving you politically unbiased, objective advice. It may not align, and I want to be absolutely clear, it may not align with what you want to do. But staff isn't doing their job. If they're just telling you what you want to do, then they become yes people. You don't want yes people. Look at what happened with Michael Jackson. The most talented guy in the world at one point, right? And people are just not saying no to Michael Jackson, right? It was really sad. Actually, I'm a huge Fleetwood Mac fan, and now I'm just watching what's happening. You know, Stevie Nicks, the Renaissance. I mean, woman's crazy, right? She's got all these yes people behind her. I'm going to get off that line now. I'm going to see Bruce Springsteen tomorrow night, and the world will be just fine. By the way, it's really interesting, the timing. I remember when Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980, Bruce Springsteen played the next night in New Jersey and made a really impassioned speech. So I'm really looking forward to what maybe what might happen tomorrow night. So there's statutory officers that no way, no how you can tell them what to do. The clerk administers the municipal election. The clerk takes notes as are required under the Municipal Act, keeps records. You can't tell her how to do it. The treasurer, do we have our treasurer here? The chief financial, Mr. Baxter, right? Council says to you, we've had a really bad year, Mr. Baxter. We're going to run a deficit. What do you say? You say, no, you cannot do that. Council cannot do that. That's wrong. You just cannot. Integrity Commissioner, we'll leave that one aside. The chief building official. You can't tell the chief building official, issue a permit, don't issue a permit. Chief building official has to do what the chief building official thinks is appropriate. Fire chief has responsibilities, reports to council, and has to run the fire department and provide fire services. And so the first 6 people there are all mandatory officers. But look at the last one. Candace, I'm going to speak about you, the chief administrative officer. It's not a mandatory office, but once you have a chief administrative officer, she's in charge of the operations and management of the municipality. If you look, it's wonderful how sometimes you can just look at the statute and go, I get it now. It makes sense. So what's the head of council supposed to do? And I actually said it before. Run efficient and effective meetings. What's the CAO supposed to do? 229 of the Municipal Act. The CAO is supposed to run the operations, the management of the administration efficiently and effectively. It's the other side, right? And that's how the Municipal Act works. You've got the administrative side and you've got the decision-making executive powers on the governance side for council. Members of council must respect the need for a neutral and impartial public service, which gives its best advice based on the merits of the question before it, right? You can't chew staff out for not supporting you in a political decision. Staff is there to give you advice. And sometimes the advice will be, council, don't do this. Now, do you really think staff wants to do that? I'll tell you, I've been in that position. I used to be an in-house municipal councillor, never elected office. I never rose to that level of status. I was an in-house municipal solicitor. I didn't want to tell my council they couldn't do anything, right? At one point, it was like, oh, legal counsel is going to say no again. And I say, I'm saying no because it's the right thing to do. I've looked at it. This is the wrong decision. But you know what, counsel? I respect you. You make whatever decision you want. But I'm not going to cover your butt by saying something that is wrong. And that's why staff, you have to have a vibrant, empowered staff, right? You have to have a staff that's not afraid of coming out and speaking to you and being honest with you. And what I keep seeing is all of these issues with council staff relations where there seems to be a bit of mistrust. Well, staff's not backing us up. Staff's making us look bad. So what do you get? You get in open public sessions, you get staff called out. So here, I pulled something just today. Sudbury's Integrity Commissioner finds 2 councillors broke code of conduct rules. Just out. I'm not the Integrity Commissioner. Sudbury's Integrity Commissioner is reprimanding 2 Sudbury City councillors in connection with comments they made on social media that were critical of staff. What happened in here? There was the budget. The budget came forward and there was a $5 gate fee that was controversial that was included in there. And one council member decided he was going to go on social media, and he wrote that he planned to raise a motion to suspend the fee and felt that it was, quote, slipped into a line item in the budget. Okay, that was his comment. One of his council members supported him, and she wrote, quote, "It's just one more example of how staff conveniently forgot to inform council," end quote. And then questioned when council was going to receive, quote, in capitals, "all the information we need to know," instead of just bits and pieces. Now, is that fair? Absolutely not. That's not fair. The integrity commissioner, who's, by the way, under fire because he's holding firm at this municipality. He lambasted a council member a couple of months ago. These are different council members. And he says, no, this merits a penalty in one instance. Sorry, a penalty for both of them. A reprimand in one, but in the second, a suspension of pay. And I agree. Those are those types of comments that if they're said in an open public session or on social media or to, out loud at other places, what does it do? It erodes the whole fabric of good government. All of a sudden, you're pitting council against staff, and you've got the public looking in on this, right? The public who come before you, and tell me if this has ever happened. Council, I've read staff's report. It's completely wrong. I don't know how they could have done this. This is a waste of paper, right? No qualifications, no background. They just come. And why do they do that? Because they have a vested interest. Just think about that. Anyone who comes and speaks to you about something typically has a vested interest. My vested interest today is to try to tell you the straight goods and to be completely honest and blunt with you. And I will be. I'll try to be with you in camera as well. So you have someone who comes in front of you and they'll say, I'm a professional planner and I don't agree with your planner's report. Where do they go to school? That's the person that should be called out, because your staff are professional staff. You've been retained. They've been engaged by you. They've been contracted. They probably went through some rigorous process to be hired. All of a sudden, you have someone coming, and they know better. And here's the problem. I just spoke at the Ontario Western Wardens Caucus last week, and the title that they gave me was "Politicians Behaving Badly," and I hated the title. I wasn't about to go up there and just show a bunch of pictures of badly behaving council members across Ontario. It would take me too long, but I wasn't about to do that. I said, politicians behaving badly and the councils who enable them. Because over and over again, what you see is, yeah, I agree with that comment. And meanwhile, they disparage your staff. And then that's not enough. Then you got to pile on and say, yeah, I disagree with you. It's a professional opinion sometimes that's being given to you. You disagree, okay. You're allowed not to accept the recommendation, the whatever is said, but you have to be really careful how you do it. You have to respect the need for an impartial, neutral, objective, unbiased staff that come before you and sometimes will disagree with you. You can make the ultimate decision. You can. It's right. I mean, there's recommendations. You can say we're not accepting the recommendations. As integrity commissioner, I give recommendations, and I appreciate, except in a few municipalities, I think there's about 10 of them that have actually said to us, you know what, this system doesn't really work very well because I have to work with my fellow members. And if I actually vote against them on one of these things, they might not talk to me again, right? So they say, here, integrity commissioner, can we actually give you the power to impose penalties? And I've said, yeah, you can. I still think members of council should keep their own house in order. That's my view. However, I think 10 municipalities have actually given us the authority to impose penalties. And why? We're neutral. We're impartial. We might not be reappointed because we may not get on favorably, but that's okay. And I respect that, because if someone wants to not appoint me, and I'm going to call them out, Central Elgin, because we wrote a report, because someone acted atrociously badly, and then my partner in presenting the report is asked, do we have to follow it? And she said, no, you can impose, you can follow my recommendations completely. You can reject them completely, or you can change them. And they go, well, you know what? We don't even want to accept your report. Now that's wrong. That's wrong. It's wrong in so many grounds. So, and I spoke up forcefully about it when the time came for a renewal of our appointment, which was supported by staff who said, hey, we only got this guy 2 years ago. We did a full search and came out by far the best, and you appointed him. And in fact, they've been doing their job. It was like, nah, we don't need this guy from Toronto. What do they need? A local solution. What's the local solution? It's a guy who you appoint who knows you and will do anything you want. And then you've got a yes man, and the whole system falls apart. So, how do these work together? Okay, so I've talked about the various role players. Let's talk about staff. Council's roles to make decision, make rules to govern the municipality, and staff's role is to carry out the policies. I've already said that too. I want to read you this because I think it's really great. I only found this recently. It's an enclosed meeting report, but I think it's really, really terrific. And this was written by someone who I didn't necessarily see eye to eye with, the former Ontario Ombudsman, Andre Moran. But I really like what this report says. The political power held by councils is in the main a policy-making power. Mayors and municipal councillors represent the public by holding delegated authority to pass bylaws and determine broad questions of policy, including the allocation of municipal programs and services. They also establish and oversee administrative policies, practices, and programs that are required. By contrast, councillors are not given the power to do the hands-on administration of a municipality. It is the officers and employees of a municipality who implement and administers council's policies and program choices and carry out the duties. Section 227. A clear demarcation of what the roles are. The distinction, I like this quote. I probably showed you this before. The prescriptive literature offers clear, if not always attainable advice. This is written by 3 academics. Politicians must take a clear leadership role in policy setting and stay out of administration and management. And this is the problem that I keep getting. Many times, council members want to weigh in operations, and that's wrong. I've had former fire chiefs on council saying, I'm going to drop the master fire plan. No, that's not your role anymore. I've had lawyers on council saying, I don't agree with that opinion. That's not the opinion I was given. And my view is, no, that's wrong. You can't do that. The lawyer on staff or the external lawyer that's been retained will give you that opinion. When you become a member of council, you bring to the council table your experience, your knowledge, your expertise. You're a generalist at that point. Your professionals are your staff. That's why you've hired them. Council staff relations policy. You have to have one. Your current policy says members and staff shall work together in furtherance of the common goal of serving the public good. What does this go back to? It goes back to my first slide, right? You are to act in the best interest of your municipality. Principally, respectful conduct, right? It's one of the requirements in the regulation. You have to have 4 things in your code of conduct. You have to deal with the use of municipal property, confidential information, gifts, benefits, and hospitality, and respectful conduct. But look at what it says. It doesn't just say respectful conduct, period, like the other ones. It says including conduct towards officers and employees of the municipality. So I just read to you what Sudbury did, right? Be careful of saying things publicly because the leading case, Villeneuve and North Stormont, what happened in this case? Councillor Villeneuve felt that she could say anything that she wanted, anytime that she wanted, any way that she wanted to speak. And that's just not right. Council passes a code of conduct and it puts in proper standards for your behavior. Okay. And she called out the CAO at a public meeting, basically, at its very essence, said, why aren't you telling us the truth? Calling him a liar in front of everyone. There was an integrity commissioner investigation. We were not the integrity commissioner. The integrity commissioner came back and said, yeah, you just can't do that. You can't do that in a public setting. Typically, integrity commissioners do not want to weigh in on what happens at a formal meeting. Why? Because integrity commissioners typically try to respect the autonomous nature of an assembly meeting and having procedural rules to carry out, and the role of the chair to be able to guide everyone and to give everyone certain standards and regulations for comportment at a meeting. That's the general rule. However, integrity commissioners sometimes will weigh in. We have the most egregious one that we had is when the mayor stepped away from the chair, went into the council table, said, "I'd like to speak on this item." And then she tore a strip off her chief planner, and then he had prepared a report, which she tore up in front of council and said, "This is what I think of your report." So we weighed in. Did not get us any favors. The only municipality that I've ever resigned from, by the way. So you have this. In Villeneuve, the court came back and said, it is the relative power imbalance between staff who do not have a voice at council and elected members who do, which means that you have to respect council's role and staff's role and what they mean to do. It has to be acknowledged and respected. Okay, and that's the leading case. It's statements made at a council meeting. So I'm going to go quickly through this because I want to give you sufficient time. Am I doing okay? Yeah, okay. So here's some areas of influence, things that have come up, not in this municipality necessarily. So I don't want you to look at this and go, oh, you know what? Julie Snook was coming to me and telling me something. No, that isn't the case. I have pulled this together from a bunch of things that I've seen in areas that many municipalities have told me that were problematic. So, planning applications. You can't make commitments to an applicant. I was taught this when I was a young lawyer. My mentor, Robert W. McCauley, said to me, "John, if you ever have a planning file, the first thing you do is you call the ward councillor and get on their side. Take them out to dinner. Take them somewhere." You can't do that anymore. That's the old days. You can't do that. So it's really interesting. But what it used to be is like, let's make a deal. The ward councillor would say, okay, this is what we can do. You're not to do that. You can't bind council. Why? There's many reasons. Look at the bottom. You have no legislative or executive authority to do that on behalf of the municipality, right? First of all, there may be certain strict, Section 41 of the Planning Act is very clear. You can only have on-site work, except maybe some sustainable development things that might be slightly offside. But you can't say to someone, you know what, you're going to cause some traffic congestion. We'd like you to widen the road, 300 meters down. We want a signalized intersection. You can't do that. By the way, there's cases that say if you do that, it's at your prejudice. You may get this great deal, and the site plan applicant, the developer, might go, great, I'll voluntarily enter into my agreement. Do you know that they can renege on that? They can go to court after the fact and go, by the way, the municipality had no authority as a creature of provincial statute to impose that. I'd like my money back. And they will get it. This has happened. Scarborough Separate School Board versus City of Toronto. So the anti-bonusing rule will not allow you to negotiate so well that you say to the developer, by the way, we won't charge you building permit fees or development charges. We're going to have them. You can't do that. Anti-bonusing rule in Section 106. And I mentioned the indoor management rule. What you may say, what commitments you may make, may be at your peril, because someone could say, you know what, you negligently misrepresented what I could get here. And yes, I'm a sophisticated developer and I should have known better. And I know the Supreme Court of Canada in P&I versus Victoria says I'm supposed to know, and I'm supposed to be someone who's equal bargaining power. And yet I'm still going to bring this claim against the municipality. And by the way, I'm going to focus on a particular member of council and say, Councillor Mink, you should never have done that. You negligently misrepresented, and therefore I'm going to sue you personally. It's a problem. Okay. Ontario Land Tribunal. I love this. I had to cross-examine someone once on this, so I just love this. You make your decisions with respect to planning applications at council. And if someone decides they're going to appeal, you have a right. You have a right to say, oh, we're going to get our lawyer to be involved. We're going to send our planners, right? But what you don't do is you don't show up at the meeting and say, hey, I'm a counselor from this ward and this is important to me. I'm a council member, so you should hear me. You know what the OLT is going to do? They're going to completely ignore that, and you're going to be cut to shreds by the lawyer on the other side who's going to say, where's your authority to do that? You're acting in misfeasance of public office, which is what I did to Dennis. I won't say his last name. So remember, be really careful. You're not to show up at the OLT hearing. You're not supposed to participate. You had a role. You had the role at council. And you could have, hey, what happens if council doesn't agree with your position? You say, we have to go and fight this. And council says, no, you know what? No, we don't have the budget. We don't have the staff, the manpower to do this. All factors that the Supreme Court of Canada has said can factor into your decision in making a determination on something. And then all of a sudden the council member goes, well, someone has to stand up for the people in the community. I'm sorry, council's already made a decision. You're now kind of going rogue and you're not allowed to do that. So be really careful, even appearing in your personal capacity at the OLT. Okay, bylaw enforcement, big thing. So, right of member of council to express their views can occur at the council table when you're passing your bylaws to do anything, right? But just remember, bylaw enforcement officers have two inherent rights. One, they have discretion. They make the decision to charge, not to charge someone, to issue a ticket, not issue a ticket, to pursue something. You don't. And you can't tell them. It may be really important to a particular person in your ward. That's okay. But you can't tell them what to do. They also have independence from political interference. That means once they make a decision to embark on something, council can't then try to step in and say, oh, no, we want you to change course. Just leave this guy aside, right? That's the whole Trudeau, SNL, Lavalin thing, right? I mean, that's a problem. You cannot muck up the discretion and the independence of bylaw enforcement officers, right? You cannot interfere with the administration of justice at all. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. I'll leave my slides are there. You haven't actually. Shreesma was really great and sent me your municipal law enforcement policy. This is council's own policy, right? And it was established to put in place a transparent, consistent, fair, unbiased, and effective process for the enforcement and prosecution. And look at the responsibilities of council members. Respect and abide by legally recognized principles that bylaw enforcement officers have a duty to enforce and prosecute, and to do so in a fair and impartial manner that is free of any political interference. Okay. Building permit issuance, it's the same thing. You, as members of council, appoint the chief building official, and you appoint the inspectors. They're bound by the law. They have to comply with what the building code says, which is provincial legislation, right? So I was recently at a council where they were very upset at their CAO. I've had a series of these things. The council upset at CAOs, they always call me in to deal with it. I'm not an employment lawyer, but yet I'm involved. And I was listening to this, and one of their beefs were, we get all these complaints about our CBO. We don't think she's doing a really good job. Now, by the way, I've worked with CBO, not extensively, but she's asked me for 2 opinions. And wow, did she know what she was doing? Okay, so I'm listening to this, and I'm going, these people are complaining they're not getting their building permits in time. I'm going, they're not getting their building permits in time. Yeah. Why can't she just be a little more flexible? So I had to, I was there as legal counsel, but I had to weigh in. I said, counsel, look, I need to say something. I said, warden, I just need to step in and say something. You appoint these people, they have to carry out the building code. They can't be flexible on the building code. The building code says what it says. If it says, this size of diameter pipe, that's the size that has to go in. They can't fluctuate on that. That's liability. That's risk to you, right? By the way, if you try to weigh in, though, remember, you've appointed these people. How's that going to look if you've appointed them and you go and say to them, look the other way on this, you've got a status of office. They're going to go, these people appointed us. They could unappoint us. And you could, right? You can revoke. Anytime you can appoint, you can revoke at any time, right? That's wrong. That's an undue influence and a misuse of power, right? Building officials, they have the same independence and discretion as bylaw enforcement officers, right? You have to respect them. You can't seek to tell them, oh, you have to issue the permit because this is really important for the municipality. Or our zoning bylaw isn't as good as we'd like it to be. So we don't want this to go in now. We really don't want you to issue the permit. Chief building official can't do that, has to follow. And if you weigh in on this, there could be significant liability. Remember, at the end of the day, there might be liability personally and to the corporation. Closed meeting information. This is the one that I've been really having a lot of issues with. Council members are privy to a lot of confidential information. You can probably point me to all kinds of things this week where perhaps the CAO or the clerk or your chief financial officer, your treasurer, sent you something and marked it confidential. Says this is for council's information, right? So you get information like that. You also get information that you can't disclose because there's privacy legislation. PIPEDA and FIPA, the Personal Information Health Protection Act. We got that one wrong, but that there are personal information that you can't get, okay? But there's also, really important, closed meeting information, right? The Municipal Act allows you to make decisions not in a public setting, away from council, and to discuss things away from council in 14 separate instances under Section 239. You cannot disclose that information in any way, right? I'm going to tell you about something that we have right now. Closed meeting information must be held in strict confidence. This is from your own code of conduct, including beyond the term of office of a member. Why? Because you're a fiduciary. That obligation continues to run with you. That's all that this is seeking to say. Closed meeting information belongs to who? It belongs to the municipality, the council, who's the decision-making body. You give confidential information in a closed setting to the council at the time it's given for council to make a decision at that particular time. This is a question I often get asked. I'm a new member of council. I came in on this platform. I want to see all of the closed meeting information that emanated from the last council. And the answer is, you have to ask council. You're not entitled to that information as a member of council unless council says so. Why? Because council owns that information. It is completely wrong for a member to disclose, use, disseminate, distribute in any possible way any information. And you've got it actually backstopped. I checked. It's not only in your code of conduct, it's also in your procedure bylaw. You actually have a whole provision in there. No member shall disclose or discuss through any means, written, electronic, verbal, to any individual or third party information and records from a closed meeting. This is one of the worst things that you could possibly do. On this, I just pulled up a couple of reports. This is one from the city of Orillia where Councillor Jay Follis did not get a good education training session from me. He felt that something was so important in a closed meeting that he could go and disclose that information to get his own legal advice. Why? Because he didn't agree with the city solicitor's advice given at a confidential closed meeting. And he disclosed it to his lawyer to get advice. And of course, the lawyer ended up giving him advice that was favorable to him. And he brought this to council. That was a mistake because council said, how did your lawyer even be able to give advice? What did you give him? He says, well, I gave him everything that council had been given to me marked confidential. That's a problem. The integrity commissioner, not us, wrote this: maintaining confidentiality around closed session documents and information is a cardinal rule of council, one that is regularly reinforced or referenced during orientation and training of newly elected councillors and reiterated repeatedly. The disclosure of confidential information is the kind of transgression that attracts a significant monetary sanction because the act fundamentally undermines the trust required for councils to function properly and for the public to maintain respect for council's adherence to ethical standards. In Demucci, again, not us, I picked Integrity Commissioner reports that weren't us, whether a member of council agrees or disagrees with the decision of council to even go into in-camera, the decision by a prescribed majority of members to move a matter into closed session for discussion deems the matter to be confidential for the purposes of the procedure bylaw and the code of conduct, until such time as it is determined by council. So it is really wrong for a member to take any information and go and tell someone else about it. So here's a real life situation. This is actually playing out in our office. Had a member of council reach out to me a little while ago, said, John, I've got to ask you something. Council's been dealing with the matter. It's combustible. It's a powder keg. It's gonna be like a huge to-do. And it really concerns people in my district, the people who elected me. So that's how we started the conversation. I said, okay, I'm listening. And he said, we've been discussing this matter in camera. Ding, ding, ding. It goes off my head. Okay, I understand where he's going. He goes, this is really important for my people. Okay. And I said, well, so council decided to have this in camera because why? He goes, I don't know. I think it's wrong. I need to tell them because this is important. What do you say? I go, well, let me tell you, you can't disclose it. And I told him the reason. I showed him, I think, a couple of these slides or, quotes. And I said, you are not to do this. And I'm recommending very strongly. You know what his next comment was? What's the penalty if I do? Okay. So this is really interesting. I wrote back and I said, Councillor, I'm strongly recommending that you don't do this. By the way, and you're going to see this in just a moment, those people may have elected you. I understand that. You're not beholden to just the district who elected you. You're beholden to everyone in the municipality. That's a key point. Okay. So the matter goes on though, because all of a sudden I get someone writing to me going, one of our council members disclosed closed meeting information. I'm thinking like, I know who this is now, right? And I get it. It's an email. He sent out an email and someone told on him. It's going to come to light. Have you read about the Greenbelt today? Ryan Amato doesn't want to disclose certain emails that were sent, right? These things are problems. Like you either have fiduciary obligations and you abide by them or you don't. So it's absolutely wrong. There's a complaint. We're actually looking at it. My partner has drafted a report and it actually finds you cannot do that. Look, all of you, this municipality, you're elected by wards, right? 4 wards in the urban area, 2 wards in the rural area, right? Of course, there's going to be things that are important to your ward, but you look after all the residents of your municipality. Just think about it. Municipalities in camera, you want to buy a piece of land, right? It may be really important to the person whose land is going to be bought for them to know that information. That person may be a really well-meaning, kind person who does a lot for the municipality. But do you tell that person that information? I made it easy for you. Of course you don't. Why? Because all of a sudden the price is going to go up. And who's that going to prejudice? The entire corporation and all of the ratepayers. It might benefit one person. But just think about it. So there's a ward or there's a district and it matters to those people. Of course it does. But those people aren't going to be shouldn't be privy to any more information than anyone else should have. Meetings, I mentioned this earlier, meetings should run effectively and efficiently, right? And that's the responsibility of the chair. Madam Mayor, it's not easy sometimes. I've had to chair meetings. It's tough. Sometimes you have to tell people, nope, I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off. No, you can't keep going on, right? You have to run them effectively and efficiently. You can't let them get bogged down in, what was that Jimmy Stewart thing again? Filibusters, right? And just, using the procedure bylaw for the wrong reasons. The procedure bylaw is there to put effective and efficient rules, not to try to stymie things. And some people try to do it otherwise. By the way, here it is. The open meeting rule is for councils to allow the public to observe what happens at council, to see local democracy in action. It's not there to allow the public to participate. This has been really made clear in a number of instances, including the Ontario Ombudsman in their Sunshine book. But it was really made clear in this case called Mann versus Saugeen Shores, where Mr. Mann, John Mann, was very upset and argued the right to freedom of expression, that he could come in front of council and he was allowed during the open forum or open mic or delegation authority. He didn't understand why there were strictures. And there were strictures for very good reasons, which the Ontario court said they're there for a certain purpose. Every level of government, not just municipal, every level of government has rules of procedure for their assemblies meetings, right? You have to act with decorum, you have to use parliamentary language, and so on and so on. What they found in this case, he argued that a whole bunch of provisions in the procedure bylaw that didn't allow him to raise issues unless they had not been raised before, to not talk about matters that were in litigation, to not use profane language, and to not criticize staff, were proper rules for a procedure bylaw. And his charter challenge went by the wayside. There's been no appeal. I think there was a deal made there. So, freedom of expression. This is a case, full disclosure, I had some involvement in. Buck versus Morris. Evelyn Buck was the former mayor of Aurora. Evelyn Buck felt that she was elected to tell the truth to anyone who would want to listen, and that was her role. The court said the right to freedom of speech in our society is not an absolute one. Section 1 of the Charter. While freedom of speech is a cherished right in a free and democratic society, there are reasonable limits. The town of Aurora, like many other municipalities, has put in a code of conduct that purports to codify parameters of reasonable conduct. The plaintiff clearly has a perception that she has an unfettered right to freedom of expression and freedom of speech. And the court said that freedom is circumscribed by the code, which is why we can go in, and we get this all the time. Jubenville in Chatham-Kent is arguing freedom of expression. She says she's allowed to say anything that she wants. And you probably heard about Lisa Robinson over in Pickering. By the way, full disclosure, I've had involvement in both cases. So finally, and I've mentioned this already, you are, except for you, Madam Mayor, you're elected at large, but other members of council are elected by ward. Remember, you're elected as a representative of the entire municipality. You always have to think about everyone in the municipality. Madam Mayor, this comes true to you when you go to county council, right? You're at county council, all of a sudden, yes, of course you're the mayor of Port Hope, but when you're there, you have to think about everybody, not just the people in Port Hope. And that makes it really difficult because you have to sort of toggle, and you've got your fiduciary obligations to, of course, to your municipality, but when you're sitting at county council, you have your fiduciary obligations to every ratepayer, every person at the county, which makes it really difficult. So be very, very careful. You cannot be beholden to special interest groups, communities, ratepayer groups, persons, class of persons. You have to look at everybody, right, in your entire municipality. You always have to consider the broader public interest in making your decision on what is the best interest of the corporation and the electorate. So, Madam Mayor, I've come to my conclusions. So I'm going to show you the full quote from, I just showed you the first two sentences, but look at the last sentence. So it talks about you have roles and they're complex. Many of those decisions will have long-term consequences for your municipality that extend beyond the 4-year term of office and should be made in the context of your municipality's plans for the long-term health and welfare of your community. You always have to bear that in mind. So where does this cause some tension? Well, you're looking sometimes, I need to get reelected. I'm here for a 4-year term. People will vote at the ballot box, right? And they may not like what I'm doing, right? But presumably staff is here for the long term, right? They're looking at this long term. They're quite aware that there's an election every 4 years. Don't think that they're not. But they are going to tell you that may be a short-term interest. That's not what we're looking at. So there's a misalignment there sometimes, right? And is staff not doing their job? No, they're actually doing their job by telling you this is a problem. You have to look at it more broadly, potentially. So it's right cooked in from municipal affairs. So the roles, council, you're the governance arm, you're the executive, legislative decision maker, you set policies. The administration handles day-to-day management operations. You are the ultimate decision-making authority for the municipality. And as individual members of council, you're part of a collective body. Hey, you know what? When you ran for office, did you think it was just going to be you? No, you're running for office on the council of a municipality. So you know that. You know that. You always have to act in accordance with that thought that I have to act in the best interest. And what do? I make my decisions faithfully, in good faith, impartially, without conflict, in an open public forum, unless we're allowed to be enclosed. And what I have to do is to try to get what I want to be done, try to convince other members of council to vote along with me. And perhaps staff have given us the background, the wisdom, the knowledge, the professionalism to know what's at stake and how it should play out. And I'm going to at least consider that. I may be of a different mind and I may make a different decision at the end of the day, but I make my decisions like that. That's where I wield my power. So my final takeaway is the executive branch can't work alone. You can't do that. And the administrative branch can't work without you. And by the way, don't let whatever I've said today, and I've tried to be very careful in what I've said about dealings between council members and staff, because that's a prevalent problem throughout the whole province, okay? But staff also have to have respect for you, and they should. I don't think that they're expecting that they're going to be the spokespeople, that they're going to be making the decisions, right? So it has to go both ways. I understand that. So the two arms, they have to work together. Otherwise, you don't have an optimally functioning municipality, and you won't be able to do the best for your residents. Madam Mayor, members of council, that's it. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for that presentation. And I think that just we'll start at this end of the table, because I do want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to ask a question or get clarification or talk about things that are on everyone's minds. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we do have the option to go into closed in case there are any specific identifiable council or staff issues that we want to discuss in more depth. So I'll start at this end of the table. Councillor Darrell, do you have any further questions or comments?
No, not right now. It's a lot for me to take in, right? It's the first one for me. So, yeah, I might have questions in a couple of days once I go over this again. And I'll reach out to you for sure if I do. Thanks for the information, though.
Thank you. Councillor Adam.
Thank you. So I have got to sit through this once before, and I've made some comments to some staff as you were doing your presentation, and I got to say, you're probably the best presenter I've ever seen. You keep us engaged. You throw in a little bit of comedy in there too, and let's be honest, the things that you're going through, they're tough. But you're keeping us engaged the whole way through. You're not putting anybody out, and I think you've done an incredible job. And even though I've gone through this and I have learned things, I got to get a refresher, and it's going to help me continue to do my job and do my job even better. Now, I do want to make a quick comment to the chair that one of the things that was brought up was keeping things in order. And if I ever get out of order and you decide that you want to correct me and put me in my place, feel free to do it, and I will support you for doing that, and I won't be opposed to it. So anyways, appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. Is there any other question that you have around any of the topics? Okay. Councillor Mink.
Thank you. So through the chair, I do have some very specific questions. I have actually 4 questions, if that's okay. So one of the first questions is, and this happens, these are reoccurring themes, is that there may be somebody who wants something done and policy does not allow for that. So as a solution, they continue to email, phone, whatever measures they need to take. At what point and how do you recommend? We've already communicated, whether it's council or staff, the resolution. At what point are we able to say, this is where we cut you off at this point?
I turned it off so I could hear Councillor Mink. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Mink. You know, there's no bright line on that, right? What's really interesting in the Mann case that I referred to, and I'm just going to mention this, what Mr. Mann also argued as part of his right to freedom of expression is that he was allowed to ask questions of council, and council had to respond to him. He said that's part of, he said, representative democracy, and that there was an obligation, and the court said, absolutely not. Now, I've been met with this question many times. You have people who just won't take no for an answer. And at some point, you may just say, you know, I've listened, I'm now going to shut it down. And they'll file a complaint against you for that, right? And it's problematic. I think the Mann decision is really helpful. I know it was made in the context of meetings, but I think it can extrapolate and can go beyond that. So I don't know, and I can't answer your question like exactly when, but I think when you do, I think you should be very, very direct about it. I think there's a lot of mixed messaging sometimes. It's like, you know, you don't quite tell them why. And, I'll be honest, I've been criticized at my firm. I'm rather blunt with our students. When I was an arting student, I often walked out of a room going, I don't think that they're necessarily overjoyed, but I'm not really sure what they're telling me, right? And so I always felt that I should be honest. And so I'm very direct and I'm very blunt, and I've been told, tamp it down. But I always say, just be very direct with people. Just let them know, kind of rip the Band-Aid off. I think you should be just like, don't be rude, of course, right? Always act with professionalism and courtesy. But I think you should just say, no, like, you know, council's made a decision. You've come to us. We're just not going to, we're not going to, I'm not going to change my view. I think you should just be honest with the person.
Continue on.
Thank you. So again, to the chair, another question when you're talking about staff, and I found that a lot of times we as council have direct relationships with certain members of the public, so they want to continue that relationship. So often they'll shift the target towards staff, whether that's they do that on social media or whether they do that just in conversation or emails and say, I'm not blaming you, I'm blaming a staff member. And they really target that staff member. And it's very easy for us as council to say, dodge that bullet, right? Like, great, they've directed the target to someone else. So being apathetic to that isn't necessarily the right answer, but responding and maybe creating a bigger problem now by responding could also not be the right answer. So how do you recommend we approach those situations?
Yeah, I think when someone starts doing something like that, I think it is problematic, and I think you certainly don't have staff's back if you just let it go. Now, you can have a whole different spectrum of how someone, but if someone's being derogatory, is being profane, is being rude and malicious about it, I think it should be called out immediately. And it's like, no, and I'm not going to support this any further. What's staff supposed to do? I mean, if you let it go, then, you're letting it go. It'd be worse if, and I've seen this, council members pile on, right? And that's the worst. And then, heck, we must get 2 of those a week, right? Where this usually social media. So I would say, the apathetic approach is probably not good. If you're not in support, then you're against. So, but you're right, Councillor Mink. It's precarious because all of a sudden then you become the target. Oh, well, I've got an issue with staff, and boy, you're really not being supportive here, right? So you either stand up or you don't. That's how I say. And I have this all the time where I have to speak truth to power, and sometimes it just won't get me a reappointment. But that's fine. you have to take your role with some integrity.
Thank you. Thank you for the patience. So two more questions. So council relationships, I just want to ask a question about that. And I think this is probably the case councils across the province and over time, is that we're all different personalities, and some members may choose to walk that fine line very closely, very like on the line of where they're crossing a boundary or not, and that's just the personality they bring. And others don't want to. They want to stay in the safe zone. So I see where the public sometimes responds to the council member that's willing to take it to the extent because they're getting more information, let's say. And those who choose not to are then questioned by the public. If this council member is doing it, then why are you not doing it? And then you're forced to respond, which then makes things really tricky. So
Sure.
can you speak to that?
Yeah, again, you're in a political position, right? You've been elected to office, and part of it is how do you respond to people, right? I mean, you could be, I'm going to date myself here, but you can be Johnny Carson and not have any, no one knows what he stood for ever, right? Michael Jordan, it was criticized, vehemently. You're a important black man in America, and you never once stood up and said something about race in America, right? Why? We can all have our theories about that, So your question's a really good one, Councillor Mickey. You're asking me these really, really tough questions where none of them have bright line tests, right? There's nothing I can say exactly, but I hear some people are always out there, always doing something, and then you're being criticized. Well, why don't you do that? You have a different personality than someone else, and they may decide to do it in a different mode than you. I mean, maybe what's made you successful is something that will continue to make you successful, right? I mean, our law firm has always been, we just opened an office in Vancouver. And I remember our managing partner said something, we just opened an office in Vancouver. And no, we didn't make a big splash. We did it in an understated, Aaron Burles traditional way, right? But some would have like touted it. You would have heard it all over the place. So, I don't have like a direct answer, but I hear you. I hear the issue. You're saying, I'm going to be criticized because I'm not out there doing all of this, right? And that's typical for council members. Why aren't you out there? Why there was a ribbon cutting? So why weren't you there, right? And maybe you had something that was more important than that, right? But you maybe get criticized. And that's just the public realm that you're in. One more question, right?
This is the last one. So you talked about the role of councillor and mayor, and we had a little bit of a conversation earlier about the role of deputy mayor. Have you noticed across the municipalities if there's a trend or what would be a typical role for deputy mayor, where we always kind of have this reoccurring conversation here in Port Hope? So
yeah. So as you know, deputy mayors in many municipalities are dealt with in very different ways. Some are elected to that office. Some are appointed for the whole term. Sometimes there's more than a deputy mayor. I think Toronto has more than one deputy mayor. And sometimes they're on a rotating basis. Wardens typically are on some sort of rotating basis. There's no one way that works. It depends on what works for that particular municipality at that time. But the deputy mayor should always be thought of as the person who's second in command and ready to step in, just like the vice president might be if something happens to the president, right? We'll be able to step in. We'll be able to, carry out the public duties and be the spokesperson, the person who's signing off on agreements, and may in your case also attend county council. But there's no one correct way. I've always thought that a rotating basis that is too quick, like every month, like you keep rotating, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I think you should have someone sort of goes in for a certain period of time. I mean, you have 6 people. I guess you could divide 4 years into 48, and then whatever that is, and then just divide them that way. You can always revoke too if there's an issue, right? If council has the ability to appoint, always has the ability to revoke if there's issues come up. But no, there's no one correct way of doing it. And it really depends because sometimes it's an elected office and sometimes it's appointed.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move to the other end of the table and ask Councillor Les if he's got any questions.
Yeah, I enjoyed the presentation, but I have issues with one of your slides, number 47, to run effective and efficiently. So we say, first of all, we shouldn't weaponize the procedural bylaws. Okay, they shouldn't be abused or weaponized. We should run effective, efficient meetings and not be bogged down in procedural technicalities. And then an open meeting doesn't mean that the public gets to participate. And I'm going back to, well, if you want to have a effective meeting and not be bogged down in procedure, we should allow our constituents to speak at those meetings in a controlled form. Okay? And our procedural bylaw that says, okay, right now our bylaw says you can't ask questions at a council meeting. Well, that sort of goes against running a efficient meeting that allows some participation. And so each one of these sort of seems to contradict each other in my mind.
I don't see them as Madam Mayor, to Councillor, I don't see them as being contradictory at all. One of the questions that I pose to my law school students is the Planning Act in Ontario is rife with public participation in meetings, right? Would the system work any better if you just cut the public right out of it? And wow, that really engenders some really good discussion, right? Some people say, what? You're not going to allow people to have a voice in it? I go, well, they're allowed to elect their representatives. They make the decisions, right? So I don't necessarily see those as being, contrary or inconsistent with one another. Some municipalities like to have open forums and they allow people to speak for lengthy periods. So personally, I think that's a bad idea. I like it when there's very concise opportunity to speak with very short time limits. And I appreciate people sometimes are not able to speak publicly and to distill down things. But we were told as lawyers, sometimes you will be at hearings and the hearing will be the whole day. But you have to distill down your arguments into these salient points. So you have to be able to make your pitch in 5 minutes. So,
okay, so what I'm saying here is that it looks like this is having your cake and eat it too. You want it to be efficient and businesslike, and you don't want to have restrictions. But on the other hand, you're saying, yeah, we're going to restrict you. So I just find we're in the horns of this dilemma right now with our procedural bylaw, and that's why I ask. But thank you for your opinion.
well, and I respect your opinion, Councillor Andrews, and I thank you for it.
Thank you.
Councillor Todd.
Yeah, thanks very much. John, I've got one question, and it's regarding confidential information. So appreciating the fact that when we go into close, the information that's disclosed there is confidential and we don't share it outside. Does the same hold true for staff? And I don't necessarily mean for staff to go to the public and share the information. I'm thinking more in terms of if we were to ask staff about details that may have happened in a closed session of a previous council, are they allowed to disclose that to us, or does that have to remain confidential?
Yeah, my view is that staff are subject, senior staff are fiduciaries, just like you are. So they have duties of confidentiality. I don't know if there's a staff code of conduct, but typically staff is bound by the same confidentialities. So staff in my view, and I've been asked this question many times because it depends on the municipality. Some municipalities have disclosure policies. Yep, new members of council, they're entitled to see everything that happened before. If the council passed that, that's fine. The new council can revoke that. But my view is once something is in camera, then everybody who's at the meeting is beholden to that and shouldn't disclose it. So when the council turns over in 2 years, staff shouldn't be telling the new council members what that is. And I appreciate that some council members will go, but this is a continuing matter. I need to know. Well, what you do is you ask the rest of the council for that information.
Is there an exception made when it comes to legal counsel if they're bringing forward stuff that came from a previous closed meeting?
Well, let me think about it, Madam Mayor. So legal counsel's here, you're asking legal counsel about something, and maybe legal counsel will, in order to give you the advice, might have to disclose to order to give you the advice. For instance, we talked to counsel about this last time. This is the decision that was made. You may not be happy, but this is why it was done. It may be in the context of that, but it's being disclosed to all of council, not just sort of individual members. So, that's a really good question. I'm just trying to think. I've probably breached that many times because I've been the continuing voice, and maybe for 20 years at some of my councils, and sometimes there's no original members left, and so they'll turn to me and they'll go, "John, you were here 20 years ago," like, and then I'm telling them the story. Council, I didn't actually think that maybe I was breaching confidentiality. I figured I was telling it to all of council, and they're asking. I was going to give them to. It's very different from you potentially going to a person and asking for information. Thank you.
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a question. I'm going to try to be articulate about it. I think what keeps coming through my mind throughout your presentation around the relationship between council and staff. I think when I think about the majority of the work that the municipality is doing, makes complete sense. And I would say the majority of the work and the traditional purviews of municipalities, all of this aligns and it makes perfect sense. I have no misgivings about it. Where I start to struggle, and I'm looking for your advice on this, is when we are dealing with issues that are not the traditional purview of the municipality, that we are not, our staffing structure, our operational structure is not designed to address. New priorities, for example, in our draft strategic plan, we have 2 pillars, being climate and environment, affordable housing, and by extension, homelessness, as strategic priorities that are not traditionally the purview of lower tier municipalities. We don't have any departments that are set up to address them. We don't have directors who have been hired to address them. That seems to be the place where we get choked up a little bit in terms of our relation and how we move those pieces forward. When I look at pieces of direction from council that have take maybe a long time to be fulfilled, I think that they tend to be related to those kinds of issues that we're not really equipped to deal with and we're having to navigate for the first time. I think that's where we tend to have more potentially tension between staff and council members. It's where the lines get a little bit blurry, and maybe we're not always great at staying in our lanes. I will probably admit that I might be one of those people who finds it difficult to stay in my lane on these issues. Could you speak a little bit to how other municipalities, or how in your knowledge of the Municipal Act and all these precedents, do you have any advice for us on how do we navigate that when our system and the rules were not put in place to enable us necessarily to address those issues that are becoming more and more of a prevalent and priority challenge, I guess, that we're facing?
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, to Deputy Mayor. Yeah, these are issues that are constantly being faced by all municipalities across. So I'll give you one example, and it may not be the best example, but it's a recent one. I have a municipality. I don't want to name them, but they had this proposal. They wanted to create a municipal service corporation to create a sports and entertainment corporation to run sports and entertainment. And I thought, I don't think I've heard of this. Like, and there is actually one in Ontario, which we found out, but I didn't know that at the time. And, we were talking, I go, you're going to have a specialized board, right? This is how this is going to be set. Oh, no, it's going to be all council members. And I went like, I said, hold on. Right now, do you have anyone at your municipality who books rock acts or EDM acts or whatever's big these days? I guess it's Sabrina Carpenter or something. And they go, well, no, but our staff. I go, well, they may not be qualified to deal with it. I said, you may have to. I said, first of all, you're saying you want all of council to be on this board. I would have thought a specialized board and some representatives from council to be on the board. And I go, oh, we hadn't thought of that. And then when we started to talk, I went like, you don't have the staffing. They may be able to run libraries. That's a bad one. Community centers. Libraries are separate, right? But community centers, but they don't know sports and entertainment. They may know arenas and rec, but not like how to book acts and like run huge, international hockey tournaments. It's just not right. So you have to have the qualified staff. So what you can expect, though, Deputy Mayor, is you can't expect your staff. And I think you've indicated, like, it's new things. They may not know about this. You can't expect them to just know it. So you might have to get specialized people to be able to do that. What does that mean? It means it's going to be like an additional hit to the tax assessment. But that's not a criticism of staff. It's just the reality that they just may not be equipped to deal with the issues that you point out. Homelessness is the one that I remembered because I know it's a big issue everywhere, actually. So my point is, I don't see a problem with that. I mean, but you have to speak up at budget time. Like, if you're passing these strategic initiatives to do these things, these big pillars, but then you don't have qualified staff to do it, you're just setting them up for failure if you're going to throw them in and go, okay, now you got to deal with homelessness, and they don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And my second question is about, I'm very conscious of the Municipal Act and our policies generally, other than our procedural bylaw, being relatively silent on participation, citizen participation or collaboration between different actors, right, who have different areas of responsibility. So, I understand the distinction between, the council and staff roles, but in the administration of the municipality and in managing the operations of the municipality, there is no preclusion that staff cannot work with community members or even potentially with members of council or other experts and stakeholders in the community in the fulfillment of those responsibilities. Correct? Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, there's no.
Right.
In fact, isn't that what staff do on a daily basis?
Right.
They work with council and they work with your residents.
Do you have, could you speak to a little bit more about how that kind of collaboration can work within the parameters, I guess, of the legal requirements, the Act, and the policies that you've discussed today, whether it's between members of council and staff working together in a collaborative way, whether it's with members of council and the public, or public and staff, or all three together? How can that work while still respecting the specified roles and responsibilities that you've outlined?
Yeah. So here's my take on it. I think that'll work for certain things, certain specific subject matters where you can integrate the three things, the council staff and the public. But just think about it. If you were going to run your municipality like that, it would be a free-for-all, and you would not get things done, right? It partially goes back to a matter that the issue that Councillor Andrews wrote, and I'm just reading in, Councillor Andrews, that I think you might like a little more public participation. That's the sense that I get from you, and I fully respect that. There may be others that might think, no, we need less public participation because they've elected us to make those decisions and we're going to make them. Yeah, we can do that. But I think where staff sometimes get frustrated, Deputy Mayor, is like they've given you feedback, they've given you their reviews, and it's like, well, let's hear from the public, right? And it's like, okay, well, we went to the public, we took this into consideration. Okay, we'll go to the public again. Then, no, the public wants this. Public's not always right. Now, the public votes, but they're not always right. And I've often said, you may have a very contentious matter, and you may have, I don't know how many people you can fit here. Let's, 120 people in this room, and they may be the vocal minority. They may be making really bad decisions or want you to make a really bad decision, and they're coming out in force to try to exert the pressure for you to do that. And it's really tough. You got to stand up against them. So my view is, I think what you're suggesting is we'll work on very specific things where you've got an arts council, for instance, or I'm drawing a bit of a blank, but if someone's interested in, an environmental climate initiatives, maybe the public can really bring some important things to it. But I think if you were to expand it too far out, then staff will just be negated in their voice, I think, and they're because again they're trying to bring you the neutral, objective, uh, experienced perspective, but then you have a whole bunch of people from the outside saying things, and sometimes it's the people who are more vocal will get heard. The squeaky wheel, whatever that saying is. So. Anyway, that's about the best that I can do on that question, but it's a good question, and I'm not for a moment saying, and I really do respect Councillor Andrews where you're coming from. I mean, the public should be heard. I guess the question is for every council to what extent. And you may argue a little bit more, and some might say, no, we're actually hearing from them enough, or even too much. And
Thank you. I'm going to just actually follow up a little bit on that, and then I've got a couple of other questions. One is just that whole notion of, who do we represent in terms of engagement, in terms of public participation? So is it more public participation from a small minority of our community, or is it truly opportunities for engagement that does represent all the range of diverse and various voices that we have? And again, that balancing act. Maybe this is another one of those, there's no bright line answers to this, but have you had any issues where there's been consistent decision making that's only in the service of a small minority of a community, what that does to the erosion of staff and council relations, or to the overall well-being of a community?
yeah, so Madam Mayor, I have encountered it in a number of instances where you do have a very vocal, very well-equipped machinery that's behind it. Sometimes there's a lawyer behind it, or some sort of consultant that knows how to mobilize and get the sound. And then there's a bunch of people in the community going, that's not my community. What happened here, right? So there could be a disenfranchisement in many times of the majority, because you have this really well-heeled, when I say that, maybe well-funded, local group that knows how to do things. Now, I'm not criticizing them. It might be that they really know how to do things, and they've done their homework, and they know how to get the vote out, so to speak, right? But yeah, sometimes it's one of those where you're just hearing like a certain segment, a special interest group, or a class of people that are being just more vociferous about what they're saying, and they seem to be getting their points across, whether they do it, politely and courteously, civilly, or they're doing it, by exertion, threats, intimidation, bullying. But I think either way, I said, I think it's a little bit dangerous. And maybe, now I'm kind of swaying back to what Councillor Andrews said. Maybe then you do need more public participation. So then you do have a more inclusive view of everybody, and not just the one segment.
And two other questions. One, I'm going to circle back to closed meetings, because I do think that one of the things that we sometimes hear are public questioning or perceptions of how many closed meetings we have. How does that compare to other municipalities? Do we really have to adhere to those 14 examples under the Act? Are we just, trying to do everything in closed, away from the scrutiny of the public, and we're very arbitrary? I'm wondering if you can just sort of clarify how the importance of closed meetings, and what is too much versus what is not enough, and why in fact there's such an important part of the work of council.
Right. So the main rule is, of course, the open meeting rule says, except as indicated in this section, all meetings shall be open to the public. So there's this signal that most things that you're going to be doing is going to be in an open public forum. So everyone can see what everyone's views are, how you vote, what you say, what staff, propose. But in its wisdom, the province has deemed it appropriate to create these 14 separate subject matter exceptions. 12 of them are discretionary and 2 of them are mandatory. So let's leave out the mandatory ones where you have to go into closed session. They're probably not used that often. But the other ones are all whether council would like to do this. And I get this question asked quite often, Madam Mayor, is what's too much? Well, let's say you're doing in your municipality, you're needing to do a lot of expropriations. You may need to go in camera to discuss those, at least initially, potentially, find out, well, what dollars might we be saying? What kind of legal advice are we going to get in order to be able to do this? Will we be able to enter into agreements of purchase and sale, or will we have to expropriate? I mean, you may not want to necessarily have those conversations in public, and the act recognizes that, but you can't penalize the municipality because there's a lot going on, and you may have more litigation, pending and proposed acquisitions and dispositions of land, litigation that's going on, third-party information that people have supplied to you, and they've said, look, I'm giving this to you, and I'm happy for council to have this information, but I can't have my competitors look at this, right? Like, you can't control that at any particular time. So do you say to the person, let's use me as an example. I would like to bid for your services on an RFP, but I say to you, look, I don't want my information to be made known to my competitors because I may get the award here, but then they know how to bid. And so you might say, well, no, you have to bid, and we're going to have to disclose it all. So I have to make a decision, and I may not bid for your work. And so there's a chilling effect, right? Now, someone out there will say, oh, no, everyone who bids, all of their information should be made available. But just think of the risk that you're taking if you decide, yeah, we're not going to keep that confidential, or one that may have, you may have some insight into. The province comes to you and the province wants to do something, and the province gives you something expressly in confidence to you. Do you risk your relations with the province by deciding, oh, well, the public should know about this, right? You might say, okay, that's worth the risk. But then the province might come and say, we told you it was confidential, and you could have kept it confidential. You made a conscious decision not to. You know what? Next time, we're not going to give you a grant, or we're not going to give you this leeway that we've been giving you up till date, right? So there are very, very good reasons why you should go in camera. And I don't subscribe to one of those views that was very prevalent maybe about 15, 20 years ago, where everything has to be in public. And I always said, that's really silly. There are really good reasons why some things you don't discuss in public. For instance, personal matters about an identifiable individual.
Thank you. Can I take that opportunity
Sure.
to give over the chair to the deputy mayor? Because I'd like to put actually a motion on the table exactly for this point, is to go into a closed meeting discussion based on questions and information about an identifiable individual, or individuals under the, my goodness, under the Municipal Act. So I'd like to put that motion on the table.
So moved. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Mink. Any comment by any members of council on the motion? No. Then Councillor Less.
Little hard to comment on something you don't know what you're about to face. Anyways, with that being said, I respect the motion and the person that made it.
The clerk, I think, would like to say something.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I do want to just provide council with a little bit of an overview of what the process is going to be now that we are determining that the motion is on the floor to go into closed session. So under the Municipal Act, Section 239B, council has the authority to have a portion of this meeting in closed session if they are discussing matters related to personal matters about identifiable individual or individuals. Council also has the authority to move to the closed meeting for the purpose of education and training, provided that no decisions will be made that materially advance the business of the municipality, which is in accordance with section 239 3.1. So the only thing that I will say is that in this case, as what you are doing, a motion will have to be made with a mover and seconder, will have to be passed in open session, and then following the close of the closed portion of the meeting, we will have to do a rise and report.
Okay, I guess we'll move into a vote. All in favor? Motion is carried.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start with a rise and report. Earlier this evening, Council passed a motion to proceed into closed session to consider business as permitted under the Municipal Act, Section 239B. The motion was passed in public session, streamed live, and in accordance with our closed meeting policy. In the continuing interest of transparency, I can report at this open meeting the outcome from today's closed portion of this meeting. Council received a portion of their training in closed session as part of the 2022-2026 Council Professional Development related to Council and staff roles and responsibilities from John Mascarin, the Integrity Commissioner for the municipality. And Council discussed confidential items related to identifiable individuals, including municipal employees. I can confirm, in accordance with the Municipal Act, no decisions were made or considered during the closed session. So it's now time for our confirmatory bylaw. Oh, sorry. Oh, yes, sorry. Going back to the earlier item, I want to thank Mr. Mascarim for his training and education and presentation. So the recommended action is to receive this presentation for information. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Les, seconded by Councillor Darrell. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. It's now time for the confirmatory bylaw. This bylaw confirms the proceedings that took place this evening and provides for formal adoption through a bylaw. Can I get a mover and seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Todd, seconded by Councillor Les. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. This concludes our business on this portion of tonight's agenda. We have reached the end. I'm adjourning at 6:23 p.m. Because we ran a little bit over, the council is going to take a 10-minute recess before we reconvene. So we're just going to be running a few minutes late. Thank you.